Gary, you good this morning? Okay, I thought you were doing this shit. This will be the last one for the week for us, right? Tomorrow we won't do it after school, okay? So, obviously, like we had said, we were in the 8,000 to 600 time frame, okay? We did all the early civilization stuff. Again, those are going to be general characteristics, and they're going to be general comparison things. Good thing to kind of maybe follow along with here too, maybe were before, but in that first packet of yours, if you started on that page 10, and then it flips over to page 11 on the bottom, I'm just kind of running through the differences. Like for instance, we said Mesopotamia, we went through Egypt, India, right? The chain.
May I have your attention please, if you are involved in the senior cookout for the end of the year, the meeting will now be in the main office. Meeting is now in the main office. Thank you.
Which river valley? The Yellow River Valley. Okay. The Yellow River Valley and Indus River Valley. I think what we're going to do with the Yellow River Valley is we're going to lump that all together on early China. All right, because that's like the Shah, Shang, Sui dynasties, early elements of Confucianism, Taoism, all that kind of stuff. We'll kind of lump that together a little bit later, and so forth. But that's just kind of the general stuff on all that stuff. Okay. All right. As far as the last group that we kind of went into, that we want to be a little bit more familiar with, is just note kind of the change here, 8,000 to 600, between the old ones called the ancient civilizations. Okay, so ancient was that group of the river valleys, like we had said, and the transition into that group of societies called the classical civilizations. Okay, so we go from ancient to classical, and all we want to keep in mind is when we talk about classical civilizations, that classical civilizations did something more, did something better. They did something that, remember how classical just means that like they stood the test of time. They did something that was fantastic that history remembers for one reason or another. Okay? And all we kind of say from ancient to classical is that remember all those degrees of civilization we went through before? We talked about how they have social structures, and they have technology, and they have religious structures, they have political structures. Remember all of those things on there? What do they become as you become classical now? Well, all of those characteristics, I guess you could say. And it goes from ancient to classical. Yeah, well, it's kind of like they become more complex, right? Everything becomes more complex. It's just that all of society, all right, itself, and government and religion and everything like that, everything just becomes more complex, becomes bigger, does more stuff, all right, known for more things. Okay? Now, as far as you kind of look through the classical civilizations, there's a few of them that you kind of have to know a little bit about, okay? The two that we're going to kind of take a look at here are everything in basically chapter 7 and chapter 10, which was everything on Greece and Rome. Okay? Probably remember those two for the most part. When you say Greece and Rome, you kind of lump these together and call them Mediterranean societies. Okay, so these are your Mediterranean societies. You want to think about the general stuff that they have kind of in common. Now, you guys remember another group that's sometimes associated with Greece? I think we studied Greece with this other group that was kind of similar. They're also a classical civilization. Greece and somebody else. Persia, very good. Greece and Persia. And the reason we put Greece and Persia together is, remember that number one, they fought a lot of wars with each other. All right, you had like the Persian Wars, where the two of them fought. You had a lot of conflict between Greece and Persia, but you also got some similarities. Okay, let's just run through a couple of quick things that you might have to kind of think about with these classical civilizations. Like first of all, you get anything on Greece? What are like 3 to 4 maybe things you want to think about with Greece here? Stuff they were kind of known for. Stuff that kind of comes to mind. Ancient Greece. What's that? The philosophers, absolutely. So we want to know about ancient Greek philosophers. Okay? Ancient Greek philosophy. Of the philosophers, who's probably the most important of those philosophers?
Aristotle.
Remember like Socrates, Aristotle, Plato? Probably the guy that's the most important, that they always mention in the AP curriculum. They're like, make sure you teach about Aristotle. Okay? Remember Aristotle and stuff that he kind of believed in and stuff he kind of wrote about? A little bit?
He was like the nature guy.
He was the nature guy, exactly. Aristotle was the guy about the natural world. So like any questions about science, any questions about the status of the planets, how the world worked, you always consulted Aristotle. But those are our philosophers, right? Those are those people called the lovers of wisdom. So that's our Greek example. You've got the philosophers. The other stuff with Greece that you have as well is you've got democracy. You've got Greek democracy. Okay? Some of the first institutions of representative democracy, where they actually have all male citizens, landowning citizens, take part in what's called the polis, or the city-states. Okay? So we got some characteristics there with Greece. All right, real quick on Persia. Do you guys remember like the thing about Persia that was like the I think I said when we studied it, like, hey, remember this one thing about Persia? They were really good at this. They did this better. They dealt with how they ran their empire.
They broke up their empire administration.
Yeah, like administration,
Please
like how they
reference
ran
please
things.
study 7501.
Okay, so the real big thing with Persia is they were really, really good at administrating. They had great administrative practices. Okay? Ran their government very effectively. And when we say ran it effectively, you know, what that essentially kind of means here, they collected taxes very fairly, they distributed, administered justice very, equitably and fairly and stuff like that. They were very good administrators. The other thing we say about Persia, besides being great administrators, is Persia, remember, was one of the guys that were very, very tolerant. They allowed all of these various groups that existed within their empire to operate basically without any major restrictions or major concerns here. Okay, so those are some of our things with the tolerant nature kind of Persia, tolerant nature of how they kind of operate things. Okay, all right. Any other kind of general characteristics? A lot of this classical civilization stuff is going to be very much like, can you compare these people together?
Plato, please call extension 7501.
Okay. The last two that you got here, besides Greece, Persia, Greece, Persia together, you've got Rome and the entire Roman Empire, which is obviously part of the game as well. Part of the thing with Rome, though, that is going to be obviously a lot more significant, we had looked at Rome in a lot of different characteristics, okay? Number one we had looked at with Rome that you want to think about is the Roman legal system, the fact that Roman law was paramount in the terms of the size and scope of their empire. So we have Roman law. We also have the other big thing you think about with the Roman Empire, Roman roads. The Roman roads, able to connect the empire as effectively as it was able to do, is going to be a significant part. So we got Roman law, we got Roman roads. The other stuff with the Roman system that's kind of significant here is just simply kind of like the size and the scope. The fact that the Roman Empire was the biggest empire of that period of time in history, which is going to be kind of a significant thing. And then finally, the last thing that we kind of talk about with the scope of the Roman Empire is what kind of comes onto the scene at the end of the Roman Empire from a religious standpoint. Is Christianity, right? The story of Christianity is a story of the Roman Empire, right? When Jesus of Nazareth is born, he's born under Roman-occupied territory, right? Jesus is crucified under Pontius Pilate, Roman governor, Roman official, right? And the whole status of the Roman Empire is the Romans originally, who were persecutors of Christianity, eventually actually kind of accepted Christianity. And by the year roughly 300 or so, Rome itself is largely a Christian empire, okay? So we looked at those kind of factors, and again, we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper into this, but those are some of the factors that are kind of involved there with all of these different situations and all these different things that are part of it. Okay, and again, we're going through that obviously rather quickly here. Okay, the last two classical societies or classical civilizations that are out there, and like we said before, we're going to save the China stuff for a little bit later, but we obviously have classical China, as we had talked about, and we also have classical India. When we talk about classical China and classical India, just so we can kind of think about our dynasties here a little bit, and kind of what's what, and when they are, and stuff like that. For classical China, we generally want to think about the Qin and the Han dynasty, which we'll kind of put together a little bit later on here. And then as far as classical India, you guys remember the name of those two? The Guptas are one, very good. And who are the others? The Mauryan, absolutely. Do you guys remember the one major difference between the Mauryan and Guptas? Deals with the religion. About like
The Mauryans were Hinduism?
Other way around. The Mauryans were pretty strongly Buddhist, whereas the Guptas were pretty strongly Hindus. And the reason why we kind of said that, one of the examples that was thrown out there, the Mauryan Empire, if you remember one of the founders of the Mauryan Empire, was that guy named Ashoka. Well, Chandragupta Maurya was one of the guys kind of in the beginning, but I should say the guy that kind of like brought it to its largest step, so you're right, actually, Chandragupta Maurya at the beginning. The guy who kind of brought it to its largest extent was that guy named Ashoka Maurya. Ashoka Maurya, the guy that really promotes Buddhism, he's the guy who promoted Buddhism with his edicts, with those written tablets, to kind of explain why he was such a great ruler, and also why Buddhism was the greatest religion out there as well. So we're just going to put this all sort of in perspective, and what we want to do over the next little bit then is kind of jump back and put maybe kind of some of the stuff into perspective a little bit more too. Okay? So those are some of our just general characteristics about classical societies. Okay? Anybody questions here? We're just kind of we're laying the foundation here, okay? Just so we're kind of thinking about what kind of fits where and where it is. Okay? Any stuff there that we want to take a closer look at? Okay, then why don't we do this for just a couple of minutes? We'll kind of move on from the ancient classical stuff, and let's just do a quick little run through of early China stuff that we want to do. Okay? So we got basically our classical societies, what that looks like. Let's do just pretty broad run through of like early China, basically ancient to classical. Okay, so the earliest stuff in China from what we kind of call ancient to classical China. Okay, in other words, it's going to be kind of like, generally speaking, you know, the earliest of times here. So 8,000 BCE to, why don't we say, let's go to about, for China, generally speaking, about 200 CE or so. So like the earliest stuff here with China. Okay, can we name our dynasties here? Do you remember our early dynasties in China? Who was those first three? Exactly. So we got the Xia, we got the Shang, and we got the Su dynasties as those first three. You guys remember back in, what was it, early chapter 5, second week of school, had you do an Aspire chart on the Xia, Shang, and Su dynasties. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Remember what we did with the Xia dynasty? Early stuff?
There wasn't that.
Really wasn't a whole lot there. It's so early, they didn't write stuff down, we don't have a tremendous amount known by the Xia dynasty. So are you going to get a Xia dynasty question? I highly doubt it. But they're the earliest stuff. Okay. So for a lot of their stuff, we kind of just say, I don't really necessarily know that we know a lot about that stuff. All right, as far as the Shang and the Zhou dynasties, there were some things that were kind of in common. Can you think about some just general characteristics that popped up? What was that? That's going to be a big part of it, the whole idea of iron weapons. We're going to get to that a little bit later here. Well, let's throw that down for the iron weapons. Do you remember who had the iron weapons here? And how that kind of worked, or what role that kind of played? Do you remember what that was all about? The iron weapon, the whole status of weapons, iron weapons, and the status of those weapons. You're right, though. It totally is. It's totally kind of about this. The one idea that basically starts to happen is with the Shang dynasty here. The Shang dynasty, before you had iron weapons, what was the type of thing that they typically had for tools, or for weapons in addition to iron weapons? It wasn't as good. It was the bronze weapons, right? So these were the first guys that used bronze weapons. And they had it for everything. They used it for weapons, they used it for day-to-day stuff, everything. Remember what they were able to actually do with their bronze weapons, though? I kind of use a term for this. The bronze weapons they're able to use, it's strong, it's nice, and they're able to kind of keep it for themselves, okay? But in addition to the bronze weapons, we have to understand that both of these guys also start to utilize iron weapons. The only issue with that, though, okay, is what did they start to realize about the iron weapons? What couldn't they do after a while here in China? They couldn't control it, right? They tried really hard to like monopolize it, make sure that nobody else would get it, especially if you're in China, who's like your number one enemy? Your people that are...
Lower classes.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Part of it's the... I was thinking about enemies from outside, though.
Central Asian nomads.
Yeah, your nomads, those Central Asian nomads. They're always coming in trying to steal what China's got. So remember, the one thing these guys always tried to do is two things. One, keep the weapons away from those people from far away. And number two, what they actually started to do way back when, is it's a real simple way to keep people out. What do you build? You build walls. You build kind of what begins the process of the Great Wall of China. They didn't call it that back then. They just called them defensive walls. But the idea is we went from bronze weapons to iron weapons, okay? So those are some of the characteristics. But here's the deal, guys. At the end of the Zhou dynasty, the reason why this kind of becomes a real big problem is that by the end of this dynasty, basically what they found out is they could no longer monopolize them, okay? Could no longer control, okay, the iron weapons. And if they can't control it anymore, what does that lead to in the government? What did that lead to for the Zhou dynasty? What did it have to do, basically, if it can't control the weapons, it can't control outsiders? What's going to happen to a government? It's going to fall apart, right? The Zhou dynasty is going to fall apart. It's going to fall apart into a series of chaotic factors here because of the fact that it can't control these iron weapons. We'll get to the rest of that stuff a little bit later. All right, other stuff with Shang and Zhou dynasty. Can you guys remember like 2 or 3 other just like minor details that they were up to back then? Could deal with society, religion, anything like that. Oracle bones. That's a good one. All right, do you remember the oracle bones? Remember what they did with those? What they do? Remember oracle bones are the ones that they heated up those animal bones. They inscribed questions on them, and they heated them up, and wherever the cracks laid, that was basically their answer to the question. What is that kind of an example of, maybe? What did it teach us about? Yeah, kind of their history, like what was important to them. We could see what type of questions they were asking, what was kind of important. It also tells us a little bit about religion, because there were some religious connotations, and it showed us their writing system. You guys remember what type of writing system they use in China? What we call it? Yeah, like the character pictographic style here, where they don't have letters making syllables and words and stuff, but they have characters, which made it very difficult to write. Only a few people could actually do that for that reason. Okay, so we started talking about oracle bones. What's another thing religion-wise they did?
Veneration of
They
ancestors.
did veneration of ancestors way back when. You guys remember what this was? What you do to venerate your ancestors?
You go and like give them food and water and.
On their gravesite, right? You go to their gravesite and you keep like your dead relatives alive. You go give them their favorite treats, you celebrate their birthdays and stuff after they have died. Because what is really like the most important part, like the social aspect of China? It's keeping what? Is family, right? Respect to elders and family, right? Yeah.
So like after like 5 generations,
Yeah.
you have to like celebrate every single person in your family that has ever died.
Yeah, probably not as much. It would probably, I would say, go away a little bit more than like 1 or 2 generations after. Because it would basically be the people who you kind of remembered in your life.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I
Like,
think it probably would exist further on, but the most close connections you venerated were probably like parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, that sort of thing. Okay? That obviously shows us this concept, everybody. You guys all remember this, that in China, the most important thing in the social and cultural life is respect for elders, is family life, okay? And veneration of ancestors clearly kind of shows us that concept here. All right, speaking of, yeah, Sam.
When did the mandate of heaven come in?
That is the next thing I was going to say. Speaking of government, let's put this one down here as well. So anything dealing with government, here's where it comes. Mandate of heaven. Okay? Shows us a couple things. Remember mandate of heaven? It, pretty simply, if you are a leader in China, it's the thing that shows you succession from one dynasty to the next. As you go from Shang dynasty to Zhou dynasty, the Zhou family would step up and claim the mandate of heaven, which basically says that the stars and the gods and the spirits have aligned in such a way that proves I should be in power and my family deserves the right to rule. It's kind of the same thing, remember, as in Europe in the 1600s, we talk about divine right of kings. It's kind of the same concept that they were sort of rolling with here. So some of our characteristics that show us a few of the concepts. All right. Let's just kind of end this in our next concept here then, folks. After the Zhou dynasty, from a breakdown standpoint, the Zhou dynasty can't control their weapons anymore. They can't monopolize them anymore. It leads to chaos, it leads to confusion, it leads to rebellion, and we have a new period in China here. Do you remember what this is called?
Period of warring
The
states.
period of warring states. Okay, we call it POWS, the period of warring states. Remember the period of warring states? There's no dynasty, right? There's no dynasty, there's no government, there's no strong rule. It's basically decentralized feudal rule. It's low-key. Everybody's got weapons. Government can't control things. It's chaotic. Now, the last thing we'll kind of put down for this time is something good does come out of this stuff. Whenever there's bad times, and people know it's bad, they're searching for something, what do you oftentimes try to look for when your times are terrible and times are messed up?
Like faith or like something to believe in.
Yeah, something to believe in, something to hold on to, right? Something that is, I guess the way to kind of look at it is the answer to this question here. How do we solve chaos, right? The question was, we had all this chaos in society, we had no government, how do you solve the chaos? And there was 3 things, 3 ideologies that popped up as people's responses to solve the chaos. Remember what they were?
Taoism and Confucianism and
And legalism, very good. All right, so you guys recall doing this here? Talking about those 3, we made charts for each one of those 3. These are in essence, sometimes people call these 3 religions, and they have a lot of characteristics that are similar to what a religion would be, right? There's belief systems that govern people's livelihoods and stuff like that, but there's not deities they worship, right? They're not going to worship a particular god, they're not going to worship a particular deity. The point of all 3 of these, though, Taoism, Confucianism, and legalism, are just to be basically schools of thought or philosophies to solve the chaotic problem that China has. And just real quickly to run through this here, what would we say a legalist's response would be? They would say we solve problems by creating what in society?
government.
What type of government?
Lifestyle.
Strong, strict government, right? Let's make a strong, strict government with laws that are so harsh that people will never think about rebelling or like doing anything against the government whatsoever, right? You steal, you chop your hand off. Right? You do something bad, we're going to make the punishment so bad that you'll never think about resisting the government again. So legalists mean strong laws, swift punishments, that's how we restore order. Because remember, it's all about restoring order that we have kind of been sadly missing here. All right, how about a Taoist? Taoists are a little bit different, right?
Withdraw from society.
Taoists are all about withdrawing, exactly. So a legalist says strong laws. Taoist says the The way you solve a chaotic society is you leave that society, you withdraw from that society, and just leave. All right? Become one with nature. Remember the Taoists would say that you have to become one with the Tao. The Tao, they said, is the way. They also said the Tao is everything, but at the same time, the Tao is nothing at all. You think about something like that. What does that mean? I don't know what that means, but that's a Taoist philosophy. You withdraw, okay, from society. And the last one we said was Confucianism. Probably your most important one to be familiar with, everybody, is Confucianism, okay? Because what is a Confucianist going to say? Confucianist is going to say you need to have advanced education. We need to educate people. Because if you educate people, what type of people do we create?
Smart people.
Yes, we create very smart people. And we love smart people because smart people are ideal individuals. They have the best morals, they have the best characters, they have the best everything, and, Alan said,
They're strong governors.
they can be great government leaders one day. Remember the thing that when you get Confucianist questions, they're going to be like, what did Confucianist stand for? Pretty much it's going to say something about how strong education, good government. Confucianists say you want to have a strong, powerful government run by competent, good people. Okay? And then finally, the last thing, besides having a great education, which by the way, you want to train people oftentimes work in the government and stuff like that, where you have a really, really stable, really well-oiled bureaucracy and stuff like that. And the last thing you want to have with Confucianists, because we want to create ideal people, we want to create these great individuals, right? The thing you also say is that a Confucianist is very, very family-centered, right? They're really, really concerned with family being the center of their livelihood, respect for elders, traditional Chinese values, okay? And now as we go forward, which one of the philosophies actually wins out in the form of like creating the next dynasty? Well, which one is it formally though? It's legalism, all right? Because think about it, it's not going to be a Taoist, right? Taoists don't really want government. And Confucianists are going to be about the government, but ultimately it's the legalists that win out. And I guess the thing to think about with China here is that legalists oftentimes ran the government or were the leaders, but the Confucianists were oftentimes the workers in the government. They're the ones who oftentimes helped out, provided certain values and principles for it, okay? So that's kind of our case, and just so you see what kind of happens next after the Qin and the Han, reestablish centralized order, Qin and the Han dynasties are our next two. Okay? If we're good, guys, we'll wrap it for the week. We'll kind of do some finishing touches on this stuff next